Morning, Trainiacs. We are here with the man, six-time world champion, Dave Scott.
Thank you, Taren. Nice to be here in lovely Kona. And this backdrop we have, this is not my unit, but this is lovely.
Well, no, I imagine yours is much more spacious,
No.
a palatial estate.
No, it's not. It's a bit ramshackle, but it's on the water.
I bet.
It's
yeah.
a plus.
Well, I mean, it makes you tougher. That's how you keep that hard chiseled look that you've got.
I don't need to be tougher at 65, but thank you.
Let's do some housekeeping here before we get into talking about the race. We should thank S Fuels. We've got the new bars here. Thanks to them for setting this up. While we are here at the Hoob House, everyone can play nicely together. Thanks to Hoob for letting us film here. But we are sponsored all week by Roka, so go to roka.com/Taren to enter the giveaway. And let's start talking about the race a little bit. When you come here, you have won here 6 times. You raced here for many, many years, very competitively. You hold camps here. You come here a lot throughout the year. You have a lot of media commitments like this throughout the year. Like, what do you associate the island with? Is it work, or is it fun, or is it like kind of almost a religious thing? Like, what do you think about it?
Well, I obviously have fond racing memories way back when. Started in 1980, that was on Oahu, but since 82, I've come out, missed I think 3 times and seen all the races. So obviously there's a pull back to the Big Island, and the energy is always infectious, just like when I race. So I can see it each day. It's Monday race week right now, and every day there's a little bit more nervous energy. I've tried to jog along the Le'i Drive, and of course people are blowing by me in all directions.
The amount of 3-minute 30 kilometers that happen out there in race week, like, do another one, fellas. See how that works out for you on Saturday.
There are a lot of 3-minute kilometers out here, and they might be running 6.5 on race day. But
yeah,
I love coming back. I like, again, not to overuse the statement, but the energy when I raced. Didn't really matter how I felt coming into the race. I said, I know I'm going to have a good day. I don't know how good it's going to be. And, I kind of feel like this week I have a lot of commitments and a lot of time and extra energy. But by the time we get to Saturday and race day, I like, my time then is minimal. And I enjoy the race and how it unfolds. And, everyone's kind of pseudo predictions on it, and what's going to happen. The talent is amazing. I've just seen it come up every year, and I'm hoping that I'm hoping the athletes have kind of a normal Kona day. I think last year was a historic weather day. Even to take the race aside, it was an amazing day. And then they had the welcoming tailwind coming home in pretty mild conditions. So I'd like to see them work a little bit. I think it'd break open the race.
Did you ever think, say last year, that you would have wanted a day like that in your racing career? Because you had hellish days. Like,
yeah, there were a number of years that even out at Waikoloa, which is about 40K out on the old course, it would be about 50K now. We didn't do the in-town bit. We had headwinds that were ferocious, outrageous, and then Kauai and all the way up to Hawi, that last 12K, 7 miles going up to Hawi, there were headwinds that almost stopped you in your tracks. Psychologically, I think the athletes that are wrestling with that headwind, it can get into your brain that, oh boy, I'm having a rugged day. And I've told a lot of athletes that it never blows in your face, for 90K. It switches, it turns. You're going to be moving your gears. You can stand up. The terrain changes a little bit. So, but I like a day that challenges them a bit more. Kona-like conditions. The sun is out like today. It's hot, and we see a little bit of wind. Let's see what happens.
Yeah. Is respect for the island a thing in your opinion? Because you hear a lot of the people talk about. I don't know. I can think of some examples of athletes that almost got too cocky too early, and then would come back and have a complete meltdown in the pro race. But is that folklore, or like, you seem like a pretty straightforward kind of guy, that if there's anyone that would say, that's crap.
A Well, I think obviously you have to have respect the island. I think the traditions here go back hundreds of years, and I think the Hawaiian culture is unique. I mean, a lot of times, you're from Canada, I'm from the States. We think of Hawaii as almost a different state, just because of the uniqueness of it, and the Big Island, which we're on, has that long Hawaiian heritage. I think people should know it when they come over here. As far as the athletes, it still is our Wimbledon. It still is our biggest race in the sport. Not taking anything aside from the Olympics, but everyone wants to do well here, and I think the internal pressure that people have and the intimidation, maybe because of the conditions. There are a lot of athletes that have performed well throughout the year, but yet they're doubting their ability here. And I have seen this many years in watching the race, and particularly I'll cite the men's field. There's that large group, and you've seen them, 15 to 20 guys that always want to be in this pack. But yet, my sense is that there's only a few that think I can win this. Some are just along for the ride. They want to get through the second leg and then start the marathon. And I also, on the condo that I have down here, and it's roughly about 4K into the run, the whole field is fragmented right away. In that first 4K, the men's field that was together for 180K or close to is now, the game is over with. So I always wonder, has the athlete prepared improperly? Are they psychologically intimidated by it? Have they given up already? And
At 4K?
At 4K. Really? At 4K. It's.
Now, why do you think that is? Are they racing to basically just to not lose as opposed to win, so that they don't risk losing a top 10, as opposed to putting a lot on the line to potentially have a top 3?
I don't know. It's a hard thing. It's hard to pick on athletes that have had stellar years and they haven't been able to do it in Hawaii. And my arch rival Mark Allen had a lot of bad years here. He did it 6 times. He struggled. I caught him twice in early races. He beat me in '89, but it took him a long time. And we've talked about this a lot. We have a storyline called 1989thestory.com, and we have 10 chapters that we kind of unveiled our thoughts from '88, where I dropped out the night before the race. Mark had a terrible race, had 3 flats. And he admitted, even when I had dropped out in '88, to answer your question, he wasn't really ready to race. He had heard that I had dropped out, and he said, and I'm paraphrasing him, I've beaten everyone that's lining up tomorrow. Dave is out. It's my game. But then he said, really, I wasn't in the psychological framework to really win. Now, he had mechanical issues, and I just thought, it was a kind of a revealing point for, one of the greatest athletes ever, and he was in my era, that he wasn't really ready to race here. My sense is that a lot of athletes are trying to survive when they get to the run. Yeah, placing the top 10, sure, they'd like to be in the top 10. They'd like to be on that stage, but a lot of them go from the top 10 on the bike to 20-something. I mean, we see a huge disparity in the marathon times. And even the best athletes now, they're extraordinary. I mean, I would love to see what they have done in the 70.3 races and translate that into a fast marathon here. Even Jan Frodeno, 2 times that he has won, and I would say that if he was seated here, he hasn't run well. He has not run well. He's running slower than
as well as he can. Yeah, he does a very measured run.
Well, measured run is, I look at it, measured run. Let's not measure it. Let's go flat out and exploit your talents. Yeah. And he's at his capacity. So he's run 2:45 here. That's slower than his aerobic pace. He has a capability of going under 2:35 along with a whole host of others. There are.
And what were you and Mark in '89? 2:40 high?
No.
But it included transition.
The actual run time, Mark went 2:38. What's in the annals of our sport is 2:40.04 for Mark, and I was 2:41.
Okay.
But they were really 38 and 39 run times.
Because it included transition 2.
Yeah, we didn't have chip timing.
You didn't have. They just guessed. They just made it up. It could have been 2:52 for that.
It was folded in. We didn't take 10 minutes for a transition, but thank you.
What was it? Did you have, say, an X factor that you think helped you get here? Because when I look at the conditions here being so extreme, everyone is trying to be as fit as they can for this. You're dealing with like being 1% of 1% of 1% of the 4 million people that try to make it here. At that point, you've got to have mental strength or genetic abilities that just aren't normal. What do you think yours was?
Just ornery.
Just grouchy?
Grouchy, yeah, absolutely. We put a lot of adjectives. I did most of my training by myself. I had a close mate of mine who was a physician. We played these cat and mouse games. I was faster, and he'd come over on the weekends when he could do the race. Mike told me in 1978, "Oh, you got to do this race. This is built for you." So I did it in 80. And I think.
Why do you say that?
Well, I said it because I think at the time that I did it, I didn't have a club, I didn't have a mentor, I didn't have a coach, I didn't have, fellow athletes to train with. And maybe to get to your question, the bulk of my training was by myself. So you have to derive pleasure by going out there and sort of annihilating yourself, and then coming back. And I wasn't sharing it with anyone. I share it with Mike. I was married in '85, so my ex-wife saw a lot of the races and suffered through all my mental woes. But part of it was putting myself where I live in Northern California, which is extremely hot during the summer, and putting myself over here on the Big Island and said, the conditions are what they are. And I remember hearing in a press conference, "Oh, Dave Scott really relishes the most severe conditions." And I
did you?
No, I said no, I don't. I like it.
This is hell.
Like it to be mildly hard, but not severe. But at the same time, when I heard that comment, I said, they're worried about wind. It's always windy. It's always hot, and therefore it causes a psychological dent in my competitors. Others may think the same thing or hear this voice that, boy, the conditions are so much more difficult. Dave Scott's going to have a great day again. I mean, it's a crazy psychology, but I sense that it gave me, kind of a heightened platform to exploit, hopefully, my talents.
So when let's put you in that position, if you can think back to that long ago, if you have to, you might have to go back into the history books a little bit here.
I'll have to dig, Taren, because it was a long time ago. But
I've read about
get to
those
your
days.
questions, darn it.
Think back to one of those races where, the most brutal conditions that were here. I imagine most of the guys in behind you are thinking, this is hard, why are they holding a race here? All the things about how inhuman it is to try to be the best that you can in these conditions. What was going through your head?
Well, I struggled a lot coming into the race. So contrary to think that, I didn't have a mind, I didn't have emotional worries like everyone else. There's no perfect template. You've done this iron distance race, and you know what it's like halfway through that bike leg and then on the run. And there's a lot of psychological turmoil. Can I maintain? Can I keep pushing, and so on? Well, I went into a number of races, including '83, which was wicked conditions, and I was able to hold off Scott Tinley in that race by 30-something seconds. It was very, very close, but I was a mess at the end. The coverage in that particular race, I remember I had about 200 meters to go. I could hear the crowd, but I was just sort of numb and oblivious to what was going on. I remember, and there's a shot of this, I sort of raised my hand to acknowledge him. My eyes are almost closed. I'm looking at myself, how did I track to the finish line? And I kind of wavered like this, and I said, well, cut the theatrics, just get across. And I kind of remember that moment. I said, and I had an IV at the end of the race, and I barely hung on. But I think coming over here and anticipating very extreme conditions and how you're going to psychologically and physically manage them and do well in them is a real key. And I always thought, okay, whatever the island delivers, I am going to exploit my talents. And I know that sounds arrogant, but it's really just looking at what I could do. And if I had the guys following me, and I like the lead, the years that I had the lead, and I had people chasing and thinking about me, if I was planting a seed that, boy, Dave Scott, he's just on his game again. There's no way I can stay with him. I don't know what they were thinking, but I had to, kind of bring that positive notion into my mind that, oh, I'm dictating and mandating the pace, they're worried about me, and therefore I'm going to have a good day, even though I may not have felt good.
Does that put some mental strain on them that you don't have?
Yeah, yes, I think so. But you know, there were years that Mark and I talked about it, where he kind of did his normal thing. He took off, and we've kind of seen this tactic with Alistair Brownlee, just one of the most sensational athletes ever to come into our sport. Very aggressive. Mark led a number of years, and I was able to catch him. And then in '89, we raced again, and he cited this many times. He said, you know, Dave has figured it out. I'm just going to stay with him.
How'd you feel about that? Because
I thought I feel about losing or what?
No, I was just thinking about this recently because you've come out with your, like, the story about the race, and it just pinged that it must have got under your skin that you're out there doing the work on the swim, on the bike, and all of a sudden Mark is just, all right, well, fresh as a daisy, theoretically on the run, because he's let you do all the work. That get under your skin while you're out there?
A little bit, Taren. I think, as you know, when you are running and you're running with someone of comparable ability, you're reading signals all the time. You're first intuitively, how do my feet feel? How's my arms, breathing rate, heart rate, fatigue? Oh, I've got 5K to go, whatever it is. But then you're also aware of your mate who's next to you. And you may sense, oh, they're breathing a little bit deeper than I am right now. They don't want to carry on this conversation, or whatever it may be. And being competitive, which I know you are, and myself, oh, I'm going to now surge ahead. So I cover this in the 1989thestory.com. We've released 8 of the chapters of 10, and we're right up kind of to the pinnacle of the race discussing, you know, what transpired. I didn't mind the lead. I wanted to see Mark come up next to me because I wanted to read his signals. I wanted to see him on the bike. I wanted to see, you know, I watch all the time, just my crazy eye. I can watch people walking down the street. I watch them run. I say, gee, their left arm is kind of funny. That right foot's everted. They've got their head cocked, you know, 35 degrees. I just wanted to see what Mark looked like body language-wise, and I didn't get a chance to. He was on my feet on the swim. He was behind me legally on the bike, but yet he never rode up next to me, never took the lead. And also simultaneously, and I didn't know this for maybe 10 years, there was 3 other guys in that race that never came up ahead of me the whole time. I didn't even know they were in the race. And I saw our bike splits were the same, and I said, I didn't know they were there because we started the run, didn't see them. So with Mark, knowing that he was my nemesis, I wanted to see him. That would have been a moment where I could just take a quick analysis of his fatigue or his strength, and then just sort of assess how I'm doing.
And then you can dose it. Yeah.
Exactly.
Do you miss it at all?
Oh, do I miss it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
When you're watching the race, do you sit there and think, man, I miss being out there? Or do you think that, like the thank God I'm not racing party?
Well, I don't go to that party. I think it's a neat party, but I also think for a lot of athletes that may have missed it, was it because they got turned down, they didn't get a slot, or they just don't have the psychological mental aptitude to say, hey, I'm going to do this. You know, I think, well, are they that grateful they're missing it? For me, it's a lot of decades past my time. The last time I finished out here was '96. So 23 years ago, I was 5th. I was 42. I'm 65 now.
But I remember hearing you saying that I think you were in your 50s once, and you still thought that you could place top 10.
Well, you know, shoulda, coulda, woulda. I didn't do it, and then I.
You can say whatever you want.
No, I can say a lot. You know, I can be really boastful now. Like, boy,
I could probably place top 10 too.
couldn't
Doesn't
we all?
mean I can go do it.
I thought I would come back when I was 54, and then I ran into a SUV and had a bad, a whole host of injuries, and that kind of curtailed my momentum. I said, oh, you know, I'm pretty banged up, and so as the years went by, I said, I don't know if I can get it back. And to this day, that thing feels funny in the water. My whole left side, I shattered my scapula, and so.
I got the same thing.
Yeah, no, you're a mess.
Starting there.
Oh yeah, it's starting. Well, that's not too bad. Your ring still fits. I'm not married, but that would be a tough task.
Yeah, how do you fit that?
I don't know.
Put a hula hoop on it.
Evidently. Yeah, I don't want to try. Yeah, you know, I've always thought about coming. I love to exercise. I'm still an exercise dog, but in the last 3 years, I also have developed a heart arrhythmia. and it's very, very common in this sport, and also cycling, Nordic skiing, runners. The incidence of heart arrhythmias, that people are familiar with atrial fibrillation. I had atrial flutter, I had an ablation for that, I had a AFib as well. I had one the end of May this year, and the electrophysiologist, cardiologist said, well, you just set a record. And I said, I didn't want a record. He said, I was in your heart for 7 hours rooting around. And yeah, so anyway, I still have it. I still have this.
Fill me in. How does he do that?
Yeah, he goes down. They come down with a catheter in your groin, and also they come right down next to your esophagus as well. So pretty intricate procedure. So I came back too quickly, and I still have it. I had it here yesterday. For periods, I have it on and off, and it just has completely tempered and curtailed my athletic cockiness. So whenever I have at 65, I try to have a humble dose of, I'm just an athlete with meager aspirations.
Do you want to go for a run later?
No, I don't.
I could maybe run with a world champion, because I've tried some of the recent ones and they kick the hell out of me.
They certainly would. I mean, on Longalea Drive before the race, way back when, I would always say, I know I can run 3:45 Ks, 6-minute miles, that's not a problem. And I would click those off with the mileage markers along here. And I did check it this morning. I thought, I'm just going to see, just for old time's sake, what my pace was. And I was just a little over 8 minutes. And that was for a 5K. And I said, well,
aggressively averaged now.
Yeah, that's just.
How'd that make you feel?
Just dreadful. So I'm telling you, but I thought, oh gosh, that's horrible. Anyway, I still love exercise. I'm still passionate about it. I wish I didn't have this heart thing, but it will affect me for the rest of my life, which now is a psychological issue that I don't want to wake up every morning thinking about.
Right. How much does the weather? Let's get into some of the athletes that are going to be racing. How much does the weather play into who can win? Like I think about, say, Patrick Lange, and every other race, basically, in his career, he's been mediocre. You wouldn't think that guy's going to set a world championship course record. And then he comes here, he's light, he's thin, he doesn't really sweat much, and all of a sudden he's amazing here. Like, is the weather a factor that turns this race into less of a who's the fittest and more of a who's the most suitable for the conditions of the day?
Well, I think all the athletes have to look at, have I done a hot, humid race before, and have I done well? And I think really looking at 70.3, totally, I'll say, different dynamics of a race, doubling the distance here. But if I've gone on hot weather and they're around the world, the best athletes have generally performed well in all types of conditions. Now, Alistair Brownlee may say, I really like the colder weather. Jan has done well here. So again, I think there's the intimidation factor of the weather. Like, I don't hope, I hear this a lot. I hope the heat and the humidity doesn't wear me out so I just can't perform. And I heard it in the Hoob clinic that I just did. Oh, the weather's a real factor. I asked people, what are you going to do on the marathon? They said, well, I've run, I remember one of the gentlemen in the class, I've run 3:05, shooting for under 10 hours, but I think if I can do 3:30. And I said, wow, why are you allowing this latitude? And I think it's just the psychological anvil that they have on their shoulders coming in here, that this weather here is really going to be a detriment to my performance. Answering your question, I think you can kind of diffuse down the folks that have historically done well here. Weather's not a factor, and they think, oh, I can win this race, but it's a small handful, both men and women.
So I've heard exactly, I think what you're saying. Some people have just said, like, if you're fit, you're fit. And if you're fit in cold weather, you're still fit in hot weather.
Yeah, yes and no. I mean, the thermoregulation is a big deal, and a lot of people, don't have that thermoregulation. Their core temperature goes up. They can't dissipate heat. Patrick Lange, who you brought up, he may have a lower sweat rate. He is still sweating here, and every athlete has to be cognizant of, what kinds of fluids, how often, and if they need a supplement with electrolytes and all the above. And I think the conditions, if you're running fast, they can come back to bite you a little bit. The athletes that are out there at 12.5 to 16 hours and 59 minutes, they don't have the heat load that the faster ones do. And certainly looking at the pros or the top amateurs, they're running hard, and this heat load, you can look at hundreds of physiological tests and looking at core temperature and performance and how your stroke volume, amount of blood that you pump per beat, is just trying to cool off your heart, cool off your organs, cool off your brain, and can you be efficient to run fast, real fast. There's only, again, the field is amazing. I'd like to see my picks go under 235 on the run. That's what they're capable of doing that. Hot or not, do it. And the women, Marinda and Chrissy, have run 252 over here. We've got extraordinary women in the race, but they haven't run to their capability. Is it heat? I don't know. You should ask them.
I've got a theory that you might be one of the few people in the world that will have a good answer for this and some insight. When I was in Challenge Roth in Germany, my wife Kim, she went to the grocery store and she goes to what would be the cereal aisle, and it was a cereal 3 feet, not like 8 feet high, 60 feet long, start your day with a bowl of carbs. Yeah. And this kind of, like, it relates well to us both being partners with S Fuels. Do you think that just a culture of less carbs, more healthy meats, cheeses, has an effect on German physiology that's playing into why we're looking at Jan, Sebi, Patrick being like the only winners in the past, 9 years? Germans are just dominating the podium for how long? Is that a thing, or am I making something up?
I don't know if you're making it up, because I haven't sat down and had dinner with them. So I just like running biomechanics, I'd scrutinize what they're putting in their mouth. So I don't know. Anecdotally, I know a little bit, and I think that the information that we have now, we are just inundated in a very positive way. That what we have told athletes, including myself, and I can stand up in front of a group and say, sorry, I gave you all that information about stuffing those carbohydrates down before the race. Not carbohydrate loading, but you're going to have to maintain a high carbohydrate intake during the race, because your blood sugar is going to drop off. The glucose fuels your brain as well. And what we didn't look at, and what I didn't look at, and I love the science. I've always had a science background, and exercise physiology has gravitated into nutrition, is the information was out there about low carb, high fat, or ketogenic diet, where you're really minimizing the inflammatory response of carbohydrates, just from a aging longevity standpoint. Your organs, how they respond to carbohydrates, how you're absorbing it, transporting it, storing it, and all the negatives are associated with an excessive amount of carbohydrates. And there's a fine line of getting it low enough carbohydrate level, increasing your healthy fats, which you mentioned a few of, and not overdoing it on protein as well. I love the science. I'm involved with S Fuels, and it's been a great partnership, because now a lot of the athletes, and maybe the Germans, are saying, I'm not going to fuel with carbohydrates on my dietary daily intake, and I'm certainly not going to change that when I race. So what you're trying to do is to increase fat oxidation. And lots of great studies on this, and we published them. I have talked about it on my website with my Dave Scott Tri Club. With S Fuels, we talk about it. We've had a number of webinars just talking about fat oxidation. So people that are oxidizing fats at a higher rate, because we basically have a big basket of free fatty acids or ketone bodies if you're ketogenic, you can reduce the carbohydrate intake anywhere between 30 to 80%. So athletes that are doing this race that said, I have GI distress, I get to the run and my gut feels terrible, you could reduce that. Let's take 50% from what you're taking in, so you don't have this bolus of food. So it's a huge topic. It's a fun topic. I think people are keenly aware of it, and you should look at, certainly anecdotally, what the top athletes are doing. Like, what are you doing right? And if you're so naive and steadfast that this is the only doctrine, that's silly. If it's diet, and the Germans are following a low carb, high fat, or keto diet, which I talk about all the time, good on them. It is working well.
Yeah. Well, the one thing that even if, let's say I've talked to some pros that talk to me about my experience with the low carb diet, with Plus leading into Roth, they would say, it didn't work for me. But they're also largely training 25 hours plus and accomplishing the same thing, getting a high maximal fat oxidation rate. They're just doing it through training. So they are basically proving what I'm trying to do. I just don't have 25 hours a week to do it. So I end up using diet to do it. But I mean, it's neither here nor there that whether it's one or the other as far as diet goes. But a high maximal fat oxidation rate is very clearly helpful. Do you think it's more helpful here because your heart rate's higher? I've just started thinking about that a little bit.
I mean, you know, what happens, we kind of touched on this, in hot weather, it's preservation of your organs. So you're adding stress, that's exercise. Intensity is the key element. The faster you go, you have to liberate more heat. You have to have that cooling mechanism so your muscles can still produce the output that you're doing. You know, the single biggest issue, and this goes back, this has nothing to do with people eating low carb, high fat, or high carb, low fat. You know, I have told people, don't be overzealous of trying to fuel up before the race. You know, I hear about people, I got to take extra electrolytes, I've got to make sure I carb load or increase my fat intake. No, you don't want to do that at all, because again, the absorption and the transport of that can be a problem. You know, I think in the race here, if you can lower the amount of food that you have in your tank, and you've got this steady drip system of blood sugar or free fatty acids that you have, and you're oxidizing fats, even low carb, high fat, so your viewers will understand this, you can increase that about twofold over just eating carbohydrates. If you're taking in gummy bears and gels, carbohydrate ones, your body says, oh boy, thank goodness, but you have to keep refueling over and over and over again. So your pancreas is pumping out a lot of insulin. That insulin's trying to regulate the blood sugar, and so people become reliant on it. And I hear stories here, oh, I have to have 350 calories an hour. And my first response is, are you doing the same thing that you are in training? A lot of people here, when they come to the island, they think, oh, more is better and more is worse. And I heard
it's harder for your stomach to digest it because you got so much more blood at the surface of your skin and in your extremities. Yeah. You have less function in your gut here.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, you're drawing water into your GI tract to try to break that down, and it's just, you know, many athletes have taken in too much too soon on the bike. They've taken too many calories on the bike, and then they get to the run, they're working against gravity, stomach is upset, and the porta potties are pretty handy. So it's a mess.
Well, our buddy Plus, who's also involved with S Fuels, I think he told me what he did on the run. It was like 200 calories or something like that. And he did the third fastest run last year, and I was just astounded that that's all he took. But
yeah, well, Dan Plus, who's exercise physiologist in New Zealand and knows his stuff and is involved with S Fuels, and he's published a lot on it, he's studied a lot on it, and he's a good guinea pig because he's a darn good athlete. You know, I think what he's trying to say is that we can get by with a minimal amount. I know even in my training right now, I do a lot of my rides, hour and a half to 2.5 hours. I've gone up to 3, and I don't have anything. A lot of times when I go out, I'll just take the S Fuels training, which is very low in total calories. That's all I have. And I find that, you know, I can go for a long period of time. I do a lot of strength training still, and have a minimal amount of food. And again, I think the message for the athletes is don't deviate from what you're doing. But if you're a carbohydrate junkie, start looking at the health ramifications of going to lower carbohydrate, high fat. And I think a lot of athletes say, you know, I'm burning this, therefore I'm burning clean. No, you're not. And therefore I'm going to live forever. And no, you're not. Because there's a lot of athletes in their 30s.
Yeah, carbohydrates burn dirty. They create a lot of free radicals.
They can, and a lot of it also starts laying down visceral fat, which is a real problem. So if you're taking in too much carbohydrate, particularly fructose, that cannot be digested. So that's a different type of sugar. Sugars aren't the same. A calorie is not a calorie. All that calories in and calories out is bogus, and it's one of those misnomers about nutrition.
Yeah. Let's start getting into the race a little bit. Let's start with the women's race.
Yep.
And I know you don't like singling people out, so let's look at just kind of, everyone's talking about Daniela, Lucy, Annie at the front, as if that's the only race. How do you see that playing out? Is it as simple as Daniela is the clear favorite and we're just racing for the rest of the podium?
Well, confidence breeds confidence. She's a multi-champion here. I saw her in Nice. She won the Worlds there, and she had a great run, just solid all the way through. And I think people forget last year I either got stung by a man-o-war or a jellyfish, got out of the water about 9 minutes slower, and just, maintained her composure, had a brilliant bike ride, and then ended up winning the race. You've named three of the best, and if anyone pushes those three aside, Lucy Charles, I talked to Lucy second again in Nice and second here last year, and
fifth in
Nice. Excuse me. Yeah, she got a penalty.
Would have been second if you had taken the 5-minute penalty off.
Thank you, Taren. Yeah, so I can see.
I had enough coffee today.
No, I have had a lot too myself. It was like an 8th cup. She's tenacious, and again. The women that you just named have not run well here. I saw Annie Howe in South Africa get off her bike. She ended up getting third. She ran 1:14 high in South Africa.
She ran really well there.
She is so gorgeous to watch running for him. And that
and she's so slight and small. That has to play well for her here.
Yeah, she's light, wispy, and she can click them off. So she's there. But I think, there's, again, I hate making predictions. I think it could be scrambled. I think everyone's vulnerable. Mirinda Carfree is back. She cracked her elbow recently, and but she's a multi-champion. So I think when people discount her, that's a mistake.
What do you think about this thing about how everyone thinks you can't win on your first try or even making the podium on your first try? Because we've got some really talented athletes, Laura Phillip, Alistair Brownlee coming in, and these are potential winners. But is there that serious learning curve that they probably aren't going to do as well as people might think?
Oh, I think that you have to have experience. That's nonsense. You have to have the right mindset. Is Alistair Brownlee? Yes, he will garner experience in doing this race for the first time. If anyone says, "Oh, he's not a contender," really? Double gold medalist. I mean, phenomenal at 70.3. He's a contender, and he could win this race first time out. Chrissy Wellington did it first time out. So I think that's kind of a silly notion, and I think if he has his normal mental aptitude, he will be a force in this race.
Is that normal mental aptitude for him a detriment here? Somebody was telling me this. Let's say he's at the front of the race because of coming out in the front of the swim. Cam Wurf chases him down. Alistair is known for being really aggressive on the bike. Do you think that aggression on the bike here is potentially going to lead to more of a blow-up opportunity?
Well, you said that. I didn't say that.
I'm asking.
Yeah, I don't think so, Taren. I mean, I think you have to look at the nature of his wins, World Cup races, Olympic golds. He
won Olympic gold in Rio, so he knows how to race.
He knows how to race in heat, exactly. So I think he also knows how to race, not being the first one out of the water, not being the first one on the bike, even though he pushes the pace. He's very aggressive. And he did ask me, not that I have the crystal ball by any reason, but when he was second in Nice recently in the 70.3, and he was really decimated at the end physically, pushed himself. Gustav had an amazing race, great runners, both of them. He said, just give me 3 tips for Kona. And I'm not going to tell you what those are. You can ask him afterwards or me. I don't know if you'll remember them. And again, maybe they're of value. I don't really know. But one of the things which you cited was don't feel like you have to be the hero at the outset. Because the field is so tight, if you want to try to smash it on the bike like he has done Olympic distance, ITU racing, or 70.3, I think he needs to temper that a little bit and wait till they get to Javi, come down that 31K to Kauai High. They're back on the Queen K. Now the race opens up. And an athlete of his level should say, you know, this is when I'm going to make my move. But I think he needs to wait a little bit. And once he feels that notion is on his game, I think his run could be pretty darn fast.
Yeah. Is there anyone on the women's side from the U.S. that you think could make a splash here? I mean, actually, let's just say U.S. athletes, period, because it seems like the U.S. at the moment doesn't have a really, really strong contender. They had Sarah True, there was some hope there, and she's had some challenges this year. We've got Heather Jackson, Jocelyn McCauley, Sarah Piampiano. On the men's side, Tim O'Donnell, Ben Hoffman, Matt Russell, Matt Hansen. Like, nobody's really shown strength here.
I think you just answered it.
Really?
Yeah, I kind of like to look at consistent results. I think if they've come to Hawaii before, raced here, I always ask, what was your marathon? How fast did you run? Because that shows me that they've got the energy, they had a great run, they have the potential to click off a fast race in a few days. So, and I haven't seen that. I mean, you mentioned some great athletes that I have tremendous admiration for, and I just saw Ben Hoffman yesterday. You know, Tim O'Donnell's got second here. You know, they have the wherewithal to say, I can have a great day. I would like to see them have a great day. The women's side, you know, I know the names that you just cited. I know that historically they've had amazing 70.3 and a few Ironman races, but again, if we come back and we kind of just look at the experience part of it here, what you'd ask me about Alistair, and I looked at this for years. I looked at Natasha Bodman, I look at Paula Newby-Fraser, their careers, how fast are they running? When you have good running legs after a long, a number of times, can you do this again? To me, that's a telltale sign that they better say, you know what, I didn't have a great swim, my bike was off a little bit, I had a solid run in X year, I know I can do well in 2019. I don't know if any of them are saying that.
Somebody that definitely is saying that, Cam Wurf, and a lot of people in our YouTube comment section are predicting Cam Wurf to win and annihilate the field.
Wow, that's a bold statement.
It is a
annihilate the field.
It is a bold statement. I mean, I went for a bike ride with the guy, and he annihilated me on his recovery ride.
Yeah.
So there's
better step up your game. No, he's a gorilla.
I am very dedicated to my off season right now, Dave, and it showed.
Mine's always off season.
But we know he's got the bike strength. He's improved his swim to come out kind of that front second pack, and we saw a pretty fast run split in Italy.
2:45, I saw that.
2:45. I looked into it a little bit. Looked like about a mile short course, but it's still a fast split.
It'd be 2:51.
Yeah, still a fast split. He's probably going to disown me as a friend after he hears that I said that. But I did look at quite a few Strava numbers, and they all kind of agreed with that. Does anyone really annihilate the field here?
Well, Daniela has done that. I don't think that will happen again in the men's or the women's, and I certainly, you know, I recognize Cam Worth's talent, ability. I met him a couple of years ago, and his cycling prowess is right there with the very, very, very best, and he has played that card. I need to blow through the field, have the lead, because my running's not as strong, but recently in this Italian Ironman, he ran 2:45 off the bike. He said it was a little bit short. I don't know any of the details. That's a considerable drop from what he did the previous year. So annihilate, that will not happen with anyone.
Why not?
I just think the field is too...
You said Daniela did it. Like, why is it not going to be a normal thing?
I think Daniela has done it, but I think Lucy Charles and Annie Howe, there's a certain element that they have not conceded before the gun's going off. And in seeing Lucy Charles in Nice and seeing her out here race, she's got venom on her tongue. Is she intimidated by Daniela, excuse me? I don't think so. She certainly recognizes her skills, but does that preclude her ability to win this race. She has to come to this race anyhow. Miranda does say, I'm going to win. I am going to win. No one's going to annihilate me. I'm going to win. And the men, the same thing. They have to have that same inner cockiness, confidence that kind of exudes just in the last few days that I'm in control and I'm going to have a great day.
I don't know if you follow, I think it's tryrating.com. Thorsten rattles his complete predictions, the 160 pages. It's incredible how much he put into that. And he's got the full, like, here's how I picture the swim coming out, and here's how we predict where everyone's going to come out in the swim and where people will be passed. Let's just look at kind of those favorites, because we talked about the three people that everyone's talking about on the women's side. On the men's side, it's Jan, it's Sebi, it's Patrick. How do you see that playing out with them? How do you see the men's race playing out?
Whew. It's kind of like the NFL analysts, you know, they just go through all this gobbledygook, Taren. How's it playing out? They're all good swimmers, so they could get out of the water. Sebastian's slower on the swim. He's had to be aggressive. He was too aggressive one year and caught him in the first 8K in town, and that ended his race. He couldn't get away from him. He went too hard too quickly. The year prior where he won, he caught him about 50K and went on to win. So, I think you mentioned Cameron Worth, Sebastian are both very, very strong on the bike. Hopefully they have a great day on the bike to mix it up a little bit. Jan Frodeno is a superb swimmer. He's amazing. Brownlee's a great swimmer. They could have a little lead. There's some other guys that, might get out, but I saw this at World 70.3. There's 20 guys that got out of the water at the same time. And there easily could be 20 in that lead pack, which we have seen here a lot in the men's. They just cannot.
Just 2 years ago, yeah.
2 years
enormous.
Ago. Huge pack. So how does it play out? I think they have to bide their time on the bike. They need to be up in the front of that pack always. You don't want to be number 17 of 20 because it's an accordion, you're accelerating, there's too much energy cost. They have to be in the top 3 always. I told Craig Alexander this, don't drift backs, be right up there. If you have to fight for that 3rd position, then fight for it.
Because what ends up happening when you get too far back?
Well, someone makes a move and all of a sudden you're down 200 meters before you know it. And you feel like, gee, I just need to kind of go with this. And it's the psychological part of, gee, I'm being dropped. Can I make this up? Well, their output is huge. If someone's making an aggressive move and everyone has to respond to it, well, how good is their battery to hold that tempo? And so, I would give all of them the advice, get up in the front. See how, these are your guys. Okay, you may have someone else come up from the back. Cam Worth is a good example. He's not as strong on the swim. He comes through, well, take a look at him. Do you want to ride with him or not? Where are you in the race? I think that as soon as you...
What do you think about letting the Uber bikers go? The Lionels, like we had 2-3 years ago, Lionel, Cam Worth, Sebi get off the bike with like 5-6 minutes between them and everyone else, and didn't work out for anyone.
No, it didn't.
So is that strategy of breaking away and trying to gain time for somebody like, say, Cam, who is likely going to put out a slower run split than Jan and Patrick, does he have to try to go and get that room?
Yes.
Yeah?
Or he has to at least push the pace to make those guys suffer, to take some, to diffuse that power out of their legs when they get to the run. And if he doesn't do that by asserting himself on the bike, taking the lead, pressing it many, many times to possibly drop them, if I was Cam Worth, he doesn't have the history of running fast in the 70.3s at their level. He doesn't have it in the Ironman distance, even though we cited a recent race that he's done. And again, I think he's got an enormous amount of potential. And I would tell Sebastian, who ran 109, his fastest 70.3.
That was incredible. I didn't think he had that in him in his life.
Well, and I think that's brilliant. It's a good showing. And I talked to him afterwards. It's got to come into this race, which he has won, to say, hey, I can run fast again. Cam Worth has to go harder than Sebastian. Sebastian can run fast now because he just had this race. So why can't he run 2:35? Jan and Patrick Lange, we've seen Patrick Lange come back from nowhere and win, and his bike time last year was out of this world in comparison to what he did in 2017. They should say, I'm in a confident, comfortable position, the margin's going to be X, I'm going to win this on the run.
And you can do that with, do you have just toughness?
Yeah, I think so.
Funny story about Patrick Lango when he won 2 years ago. He was so far back that we only have 2 clips of him, and it's by accident in our video, because I was pointing the camera one way and I was like, I'm in transition, everyone's 17 minutes back, I don't have to worry about these guys. And Patrick just happened to zip by, and then another time, same thing on Polani, and then lo and behold, he wins.
Yeah, well, a great example. Really no comment. You have to have good running legs, I think, to win this race. We've seen some of the Uber cyclists over time win it on the bike, but it's rare.
What do you think about last athlete that I'll single out here is Cody Beals? And what I want you to maybe comment on is, Cody has admitted himself, yeah, he's won all 3 full distances that he's entered, but he himself said, well, at best those were B- fields. How do you go from those and pull that confidence into something like this? Is there a way that he has to look at it that is different? Because he's actually projected to, if you look at the tri rating projections, he's projected to win a 4th place podium spot.
I don't read the projections, but I think he's talented. I know Cody. I've kind of watched his results unfold. I mean, I think going into those races where he had 3 victories, and I'll use your vernacular, they were B- fields. He still had to win, and he still had to assert himself, and he still had to finish that race saying, you know, what segments were stellar, what segments need work on, because I'm going to go to Kona, and how can I improve on my performance against all the big boys in Kona. So I think you use the softer races to, again, analyze your strengths, your weaknesses, and know that you've got to step them up here. So, you know, he's a great athlete. You know, I look at it like it's a B- field. Well, you still won. What can you do here?
Last thing, let's ask you, in a perfect day, what's the kind of race that you'd like to see unfold here?
Kind of like today. It's sunny, it's warm, it's a typical Kona day. I'd like to see some wind out there at least Kauai high. So they got 31K cross headwinds. Make them work a little bit. I think that allows the opportunity to break the field open a little bit, to give all the stronger cyclists that we've talked about. The mental component of having side headwinds early on the bike can ravage some people's minds, and I think that's a good thing. On the run, let's just have the sun out and see what happens. Generally, the wind's not a factor on the run. It's, you know, it's the humidity, it's the psychological temperament of that athlete when they get off the bike. Can I still win this?
I think it's going to be fun. Looking forward to watching it. Yeah,
it's going to be tremendous.
Yeah, I think about this very much similar to how that South Africa World Championship on the men's and the women's side was stacking up 2 years ago in the half distance. Like, there's a lot of excitement with who's out there, so this will be fun. Let's thank S Fuels for setting this up. Thanks to Hoob for allowing us to film here. Beautiful place.
Yes, it is, Taren. Yeah, I should stay here, and by this evening we could have a cocktail out here, but we've got things to do.
We do. Well, thank you very much, Dave.
Pleasure, Taren.
Great.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.